Hello, and welcome back to Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories. And in the movie business, that often means working with the major Hollywood studios. That may be common knowledge, but the actual ins and outs of how studios work and operate can still be mystifying for many filmmakers. Well, luckily, our good friend and Dolby Institute Fellowship winner, Carlos Lopez Estrada, returns for another of his excellent satellite sessions, this one recorded this past December, which we're bringing to you in partnership with Anti-Gravity Academy and the Coalition for Asian Pacifics in Entertainment. And once again, Carlos welcomes another A-list panel of guests with executives from many of the major Hollywood studios, including Disney, Paramount, Warner Brothers, and Universal, all to help demystify how they and the studios find, develop, and produce all those movies. I'll let Carlos take it from here.
Throughout the evolution of film and entertainment history, the studios in Hollywood have remained a pillar of this industry, and they continue to serve as the epicenter for the discovery and the development, the production, and the distribution of many of our most beloved stories. But many people who are not directly involved, they see the Hollywood studios as this like intimidating, intangible, or completely out of reach place. And today we are joined by 5 incredible executives who are going to shed a little bit of light on the inner workings of their organizations, as well as the many challenges, the many opportunities that they face looking into the future. So please help me welcome Sheila Walcott. She's a Senior Vice President of Creative Development at Warner Brothers Pictures. Previously, Sheila was the head of TV and film and Blackmail Productions, that's correct? And Director of Development at Warner Brothers. She serves as an executive producer on the upcoming adaptation of The Color Purple, which we are all excited to see. I get a sneak peek of it, and it's the most beautiful thing ever. Then we have Mika Pryce. She is the Senior Vice President of Production of Paramount Pictures, where she leads feature projects such as the Star Trek franchise, live-action adaptation of Your Name, sounds familiar, and the adaptation of Children of Blood and Bone. Before that, she served as the head of development at This Radical Act Productions and as an executive at Universal. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Next, we have Vanessa Morrison. She is the president of streaming at Walt Disney Studios Motion Picture Production. That's a mouthful. That's an amazing title. Where she oversees projects for Disney Plus, which she draws stories and characters from Disney and 20th century, as well as lots and lots and lots of original content. Before that, she served as a president of Fox Family, and she spent decades as president of 20th Century Fox Animation. Thank you for joining us, Vanessa. Next is Ryan Jones, Senior Vice President of Production Development at Universal Pictures. He most recently oversaw Megan and is currently overseeing the latest Blumhouse/Atomic Monster film, Night Swim. Prior to joining Universal, he worked as Vice President of Development and Production at Hasbro/E1 and also served as an executive at 20th Century Fox. Ryan, hello. And last but certainly not least is Tara Duncan. She is the president of Onyx Collective, which she spearheaded the formation of, and it is a premium content brand under Disney Entertainment that focuses on artists of color and underrepresented voices. The first projects from the Onyx Collective include the Oscar-winning documentary Summer of Soul, as well as the Emmy-nominated docuseries The 1619 Project, and the documentary film Aftershock. I can't believe that we somehow convinced you all to be here today. It's kind of incredible, and I hope you have a great time, but I'm a little starstruck, so thank you for joining. Just as a reminder, if you have questions, please write them down in the chat, and the last 15 minutes are going to be dedicating to answering as many of these as possible. So please keep that chat alive. Um, all right, so let's get started. We'll start on a cheerful note. Whoever wants to start, and then we'll just go around the circle. Please share one thing about your job or about the status of the industry today that is inspiring you.
I feel like I have a dream job. I get to talk about witches and, magical beings and supernatural things and, Pulitzer Prize winning books for a living. Like people pay me to figure out the rules of the world for witches. Like that's a cool job. And so, I've wanted to be in this business ever since I realized that it was a job that you could get paid to be a part of storytelling. And that wonderment where when I found that out, I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Someone will pay you to develop stories? I've never lost it. So that's the one thing about my job I love. When everything is crazy and strikes are happening and all that stuff is crazy. I just feel incredibly privileged to be able to do my job for a living.
Oh, beautiful.
Inspired every day by it.
Yeah, I think just echoing what Sheila said, I agree too. At the end of the day, we're making movies. And that's an incredible privilege that I don't think any of us take lightly. One of the things that I've been inspired by this year, where there's been so much darkness, is originality seems to be returning in a really great, bold way. So much has been made out of Barbenheimer with Oppenheimer and Barbie. And it just feels like audiences want original stories. Obviously, IP and franchises are important, but it's nice to have a balance. And so I'm inspired by that and the types of stories that filmmakers choose to tell, like a Carlos Lopez Estrada.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll jump in too. I think I'm inspired by the people, the creative voices, the writers, the directors. But also I have to make note of just these incredible people on this Zoom, just the colleagues that we get to work with. And I think, it's a time of original voices, like Ryan was saying, in terms of creative voices. And I think, I can't help but note what amazing kind of colleagues we're surrounded by now. And that's an important part of the job too.
Do you get to hang out with other executives often? Like, would the five of you have any other excuses to hang just socially? Like, does that happen a lot?
It does. I mean, this would be an amazing dinner or lunch or coffee. And Tara and I are definitely at the same company. So I get to see her. I would like to see her more, but I get to see her. But, to have thoughtful colleagues like this is a big part of it too.
Yeah, I agree. I think, obviously Disney is a big company and, with us coming just out of the strikes, I will say, I think I've spent more time with executives this year than I have ever before in my career. But we definitely feed off of each other. And I have found that my best champions, the best mentors are usually, my counterparts and contemporaries at other companies. It's always really good to just have contacts across the business. It really helps you get a sense of, what's really popping, what's not, if there are certain trends people are seeing, with regards to the business or even the creative. But a lot of times it's also just needing mental and emotional support because even though, like Sheila said, these are kind of dream jobs, they are sometimes hard and challenging. So I definitely lean on colleagues both within the company I work for, but also just in the business at large.
I think it's important you say that because many times you hear studio exec and you think like, oh, the big boss who just like is just screaming out orders and just like sitting at the top of the castle or whatever. And it's like, no, these are all people who have like real struggles and are also figuring it out as much as any of us. So remember.
Yeah. And oftentimes creative people who love storytelling and love writers, love directors, and are usually like your number one fan as a creative. So, even though we have sort of technically the 9 to 5 in an office, we're often a lot of times too, like have very creative brains. Yeah.
Mika, anything that's exciting you these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to what Ryan said, the fact that we're sort of at this like inflection point in our business, right? Where, for better or worse, there feels like there is this shift in movies and what's theatrical and how people are thinking about it, and that's how studio execs are thinking about that space, but also, stuff like, as Ryan mentioned, like Barbie or Oppenheimer, these sort of more original, pieces of work that were able to bring out audiences in like this huge way, and also we're trying to say something. I think that creates this space for opportunity such that not everything needs to be, a big franchise, and not everything needs to be the like nth number in a franchise. And I think that's really exciting, right? The ability to push forward, at least internally, an original idea or a different voice or something that feels special and different, because that's, I think what we all probably got into this business inspired by, like something that felt fresh and new and different and allowed us to see things sort of differently or see something we hadn't seen before.
Well, that's kind of a perfect segue into the next question. And this is, for all of you, but anyone who wants to answer. I think unless you're, immersed in the studio world, a lot of people don't know really what goes into your job. So if you can share just a little bit of what your role breaks down into, or a day in your life, and what are the type of decisions that you're making, the type of, I know that you could probably answer this in like an hour, but just like a simplified version of what it is that you do in your role. Whoever feels inspired to respond.
I have to say what my day begins with, which is I'm a working mom. So my day begins with taking my my child to school, which I start out by saying, just because I think it's important, to know that we're also dealing with work and life balance as we're dealing with all the other stuff that we do. And then once I get to work, like all of us, I think, I work with executives, specifically at Walt Disney Studios, who are bringing in and are excited about projects for streaming. So that's my niche. And very much kind of working with writers, working with directors, bringing in pitches, but also I think for us, we're also blessed to have kind of a treasure trove of library titles to also kind of investigate and see if they're new and interesting ways in. But I think a lot of what's exciting about my job is just working with and trafficking the excitement of executives that are excited and passionate about projects and about people.
Mm-hmm.
So what Vanessa's leaving out there, she's a boss. Like, she runs her department. So she has direct reports. So I just want to like highlight, like, I report to a president of production, but Miss Vanessa is the president. So I'm just saying, like, like her workflow is different. I am an SVP at Warner. So my job is basically to take an idea and bring it to the silver screen. And my job is to shepherd that from, as I said, idea to premiere. So I am involved in the development of the script. I'm involved in, finding the writer, identifying the director, helping to identify the talent, working with, and then it becomes a liaison kind of thing, because as Vanessa said, like, I work at as we all do, I work at one of the biggest movie studios in the world. So there's a lot of different departments who, once I bring the idea to them and say, okay, here's the script, here's the director, here's the actors, they then tell me, well, here's how much money you can have. And marketing says it, and here's how we're going to sell the story. And distribution says, well, here's your date. And we all kind of lock arms to go through production and to bring that movie to you guys in the movie theater. So again, my job is just to shepherd that all the way to production. It's funny because when I do my taxes, I'm like, I'm a project manager. But I feel like that's one way to look at it. Like I'm shepherding a project. But it is true that I'm on it from the beginning to the end of it.
Do you have any sense, Sheila, of an average time that you spend with a project from beginning to premiere?
It depends because it's funny. I've also worked in TV, and Tara can attest to this. In TV, things move very quickly. And there used to be a schedule. It's a little less rigid now than it was when I was coming up in TV. But it was pretty much like it's pitching season. Late summer, early fall. You get that script in. You're getting picked up in January. You're shooting the thing at the top that second quarter. By May, if you're going, and then it's a wrap. So it's like a year, right? Like, and if they pass on it, that's it. It's not like, oh, I've been working on this project for 20 years. No, it's over. In movies, I'm working on a project called Akira, which I'm sure people know this title. This title has been at the studio for 15 years. I'm like the 80th executive to work on this project. So, there's that. I also worked on A Star Is Born when I was here. That project. So Courtney Valenti, who I admire greatly, used to be the president of production at Warner Brothers. She was a CE on that project. She was the president of production by the time it came out. So you can be on a project for a good long while. But, there's some things that I would say a fast track is 2 to 3 years. That's a fast track. That's like, oh, we really figured this out. Like 2 to 3 years.
Or 15.
Or 15. It just depends on who we have.
Tara, I'll pass it over to you because it looked like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was going to jump in. So Onyx is essentially a startup within the Disney company. So my job entails everything from designing the strategy for the brand and then really executing against it. So I have a series of meetings and touch points, both internally, whether that's with finance, marketing, our teams that work directly with our platforms, just how we're gathering and analyzing the data that's coming in to build a creative strategy. And then also just working with my team, who is a bit more sort of on the front lines with the creative community. So whether I'm fielding pitches with them, reading material with them of things that we might want to buy, or actually giving notes and creative feedback of things that we already have in our slate, like that's sort of, no day is exactly the same, but those are just some of the various, things that are kind of under my purview. And then there's, the meetings and wanting to make sure we're still engaged with the town. So whether it's having drinks with someone like you, Carlos, or meeting with agents, producers, just making sure that we're kind of evangelizing what we're doing at Onyx to make sure that people know that we're here and we're a destination for their stories.
And I think just one more thing maybe to add that I don't think I heard, but maybe I did. And sorry if I'm repeating, but just sort of these ideas for movies come in a variety of places. As Vanessa mentioned, it could be our own library. It can be an original idea. It can be an article. It can be a book. It can be an anime series, like Sheila said, with Akira. So movies can come from lots of different. It can now be a podcast. So they can come from different places.
Is there a trend, like recently, this last year, and I know this has been a funky year for a number of reasons, but are you seeing more and more podcasts being turned, or is it like fairly evenly split, just ideas coming from all over the place?
Yeah, I think a lot of writers to me, seem to have embraced the idea of at least having some IP. And that usually means it's a comic book or it is a podcast, but some kind of like short stories. I think the biggest trend that I've seen this year, and I don't know if you all would agree, but a lot of short stories,
Yeah.
like more than I've ever seen ever. Um, and that seems to be the thing that's sort of luring in writers or luring in directors, in some cases, even luring in actors.
Mm-hmm. Mika, anything?
A lot of my day is just, yes, it's definitely dealing with whatever the top priority is in terms of whatever project on my slate I'm managing at that time. And everything sort of requires a different thing, whether that is meeting with filmmakers or something that might be in prep, chatting about actors, or, something that might be more nascent, reading scripts in terms of samples. So every sort of project requires something different. But I think a lot of my job is really just like convincing people of an idea, right? Like whatever my idea is, convincing various people along various departments, hey, I think we should be approaching it in this way. I think the number should be this number. I think the actor should be this person. It's a lot like, I think, and figuring out how best to articulate whatever that idea is to whomever you're chatting with, whether it be an agent or a creator, a filmmaker like yourself, Carlos, or a producer. Like, I think much of my day is just convincing folks of ideas and having that discourse, as it pertains to whatever that project might be.
I think it's actually a really good point too. Just that I like the way you said that of like having to convince someone, because I think sometimes creatives who pitch us ideas don't know that we also have to then pitch internally.
Yep.
And so when I was saying like, we're sometimes the number one fan, it's like we're the ones that have to take the enthusiasm for that idea and sell it to our bosses, which I think is a really good point.
I think that's fascinating thing. So if anyone has any color to add there, like, so you hear an idea, you hear a pitch, you meet a director, you read a script, you fall in love with it. And then what is that pitch that you just talk about, Tara, that you bring up to your bosses? Like, you're like, okay, here's this thing that I'm excited about, and then what?
I think for us, it's like then that sort of executive part of the job comes to play. As Mika said, sometimes it's like, I think this is the number, and so it's about sort of being able to articulate how this idea then aligns with sort of the business needs of the company and how this is going to, bring in an audience, how it's filling a white space of things that, we might have on our slates. So we have to be the ones to kind of connect the creative with the commerce and be able to sort of sell the whole package up to, there's always another boss. So, I mean, I think like probably all of us have a mandate that we are working within, but the truth is, I think we're probably all most inspired when someone comes in and surprises us with something that we didn't know that we were really looking for, or feels a little unexpected. So there's always, room to kind of like, there's some guidelines, but sometimes those guidelines are meant to be broken.
I think that's a really good point too, because sometimes we can help kind of guide creative folks in terms of the best way to bring something in, or an attachment that would be meaningful, or sometimes, it might not be right for my universe, but I can try to help figure out where it would be good for, so we can be allies, excuse me, in that kind of broader way.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, to what Tara was saying in terms, and what Mika was saying in terms of selling and advocating, my boss, Jesse Ehrman, basically told us AIR is the great example of what we do. Like, our job is advocacy. Like it's advocating all along the way. And I think that is the part that I think filmmakers should really understand. Once you get the projects, by the way, we have to also understand it, right? Like you think you got the project set up and yay, like, no. Now you got to get a script. Then you get the script. It's like, yay, no, now you got to get talent. Okay, got the talent. Now you have to go and do a song and dance for distribution and marketing. And then you have to do another song and dance for your audience when you're recruiting the movie. Like it is a constant state of selling. And so it is really about, as the executive, my job is to advocate, but I think also filmmakers' job is to make sure I have what I need to advocate for you. And so that's really important all throughout the process, not just in the beginning, like when you want to razzle dazzle people, you know what I mean? Like it's like all throughout the process, make sure you're giving me what I need to advocate on your behalf.
This is gonna sound like a question that leads to competition, but it's not about competition because each studio is, so different and it has like each of you have like such particular jobs. But just to give us a window into your life, like how many projects are on your slate? And even if it's like an estimate, I think that was something that people who know that we were gonna have this conversation kept asking is like, are they working on 5 projects? Are they working on 100 projects? Studios are making so many movies, and it's probably an unfair question because you probably have a couple of projects in production. You probably have a couple of projects like early development. But if you had to sort of like just throw an average, like how many projects are like actively keeping you busy?
I mean, I'm gonna go with various. I have various projects that are keeping me busy. I have various projects that are in various stages of production. But look, I think to your point and what we were talking about before, certainly, I'm not telling anyone anything you don't already know from reading the trades. My company is going through a transition right now with new management, new mandates, and I think in addition,
all of our companies are.
Every company in all of America.
I mean, I don't want to call anybody else out, but I'll speak on mine, and I'll also say,
in the trades, like you said,
it's in the trades, and also the market is shifting, right? Consumer habits are changing, and so I think that also affects my slate, right? Like, so something I bought when it was trending, or when this person was here and really liked this, they leave. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, maybe this is not a priority anymore. Like, it's so there's various projects that are in various stages of production at any given time. But I think, the market dictates priority. And also, the executive dictates priority, because sometimes you don't think people are asking for what you're advocating for, but you just believe in it so much that you're like, no, but we have to make this movie. So, I think in terms of where you spend your time, it's for me, I was just speaking for myself, it's a balance between what our mandate is and what I'm really passionate about, and trying to find that Venn diagram. And that's, a lot, because you only have 2 hands. So there's a lot of things that I'm juggling at any given time, but within that kind of framework.
But often just kind of proportionally, you'll have a pool of things, like a larger pool of things that are in development that will then kind of funnel up to those things that, get made. So it funnels up to something in pre-production, something that's in production, and something that's in post-production. But you generally try to have a pool of things to choose from.
Well, maybe here's another question, because I think understandably, no one's going to answer my slate question. But what do you think is the percentage? And I know there's another hard, like, who knows, but what do you think is the percentage of projects that you have in development that actually get produced?
Not a lot, right? I'm pretty sure you can Google that as well and find out that the number of projects. Small. I think that's in general, right? Say the average studio makes 16 movies a year, maybe less now, so 14. And we all have a couple dozen projects on our slate, right? Not 100, not 50 maybe, but a couple dozen. And if you're only making 16 movies a year or 14 movies a year, it's, the percentage of movies that are converting are not always favorable, right? And I think that's sort of why you want certain things that help the project have a reason for being, whatever they may be, right? So when you're picking your projects, you might love a short story, but usually you're going to, gravitate towards that short story with that filmmaker attached who can convert this thing, or that piece of talent attached where you can kind of understand, okay, well, this plus this equals a movie, right? Or, even the idea of pre-awareness and IP, and that being something that you think that audiences can, maybe buy into, and that helping to kind of create some sort of framework for an idea in audience's mind so that you don't have to build something whole cloth. That helps it give the project a reason for being as well. But yeah, I mean, the conversion rate, unfortunately, is quite low. And, some years you're going to be making a ton of movies, and some, the amount that I'm going to be working on next year, I have a lot of movies that should be in prep next year. And for the last couple of years, it's been a lot of like building and growing as well, and not necessarily lighting the world on fire during a strike or during the pandemic when I started here. But the reality is, only a few movies, a small percentage of movies generally get converted at large. And so you want that, whatever gives it more of that sort of the chance for it to succeed and kind of bubble up to the top as possible.
Shifting gears a little bit, but whoever wants to answer, what do you personally and or the studio, the company that you work for, does in order to discover new talent? Is it, I'm sure it's, the answer probably has multiple answers, but have you had most successes just going to film festivals or watching films online, or at least recently, what has been a successful way to learn about new voices?
It's all of the above. I think, we're definitely at festivals, we're at comedy shows, we're on Instagram and Twitter, we're everywhere, there might be talent or a great idea. But then there are also, organized, there's like talent showcases that like our casting department works on. We have writers programs and directors programs within all of our companies that are also constantly looking for new talent to bring in, to train, and then also make sure that they get in front of us as executives. So, a great idea, and the next star writer director can come from anywhere.
Disney also has a program called Launchpad that's very successful in terms of finding new voices, and kind of similar, it sounds like, to the Universal program. Within a project, within a short, we'll try to kind of recruit young producers or young composers, people who might not have gotten to do a studio short, build a satellite of those people around the filmmaker.
Once you do find a new voice and someone that you're very excited about, can you just talk a little bit about the challenges that come with bringing someone who is earlier in their career into a studio environment? And, that's a big risk. And I think that a lot of the people who are listening today are emerging filmmakers who, we're all excited about, like, oh, when are we going to have the big shot and do it at a studio? But a lot goes into it. And if anyone wants to share a little bit about, the challenges and also benefits that come from bringing someone new into the work that you do.
I really like what Sheila said about our jobs and roles as being advocates, but then what we really need is a creative partnership. And so, Sheila, the way you said it but then that writer, that director, part of their job is to make sure that we have what we need to be the advocate. And so I think It's so exciting. I'm sure I don't speak for myself as an exec to discover a voice or to find someone who you know is really special and to be the one that can open the door for them and give them an opportunity to really break their career. That's really awesome. But I think it's then finding someone who has a strong vision and really knows what they want to do, and they have a body of work to show that they can execute against that vision, but that they also understand that this is a very collaborative process. And so while you might be the North Star and kind of the foundation of what we're going to build, to get something really off the ground and to get something into production and to get something launched, there are quite literally hundreds of people who have to then come in and become a part of that process. And so, sometimes for people who are new, that can be overwhelming. And so wanting to make sure that you are working with somebody who is, both firm in their vision, but flexible in their approach so that they can kind of go through the ebb and flow and the roller coaster that is getting something actually made.
And someone that's also open to all the resources that a studio can bring.
Yes.
I mean, one of the fantastic things about being at a studio, and it should be a give and take, is that, a studio can bring best in class, whatever. And, to part of our jobs is often, I think, to surround someone if they haven't, done something on a certain scope, for example, to surround them with the best expertise and the best kind of allies that we can in terms of making sure that they have the best shot at success.
Okay, I'm going to ask you each a specific question, and then we'll go back to a couple of group ones. We'll start with you, Mika, if that's cool. But, we found some interviews of you talking about one of your incentives for coming to Paramount was the ability to have a larger platform to tell diverse stories. So we're just curious to see what that experience has been like for you and how you've been championing those after joining the studio.
It's interesting that you found those interviews. That's great. No, but also, but that aside, no, it's what's really exciting about working at a studio is that it isn't independent. It's not small. We are across thousands of screens, whatever the movies are that we're bringing to life or to the public, and that is incredibly exciting because, I truly believe that change starts with folks. Well, the movies can be sometimes the one place where folks interact with people who are not like themselves in certain places, but it's also very powerful and a very powerful thing to sort of see yourself in a space that you haven't imagined, sort of reflected back at you through the power of movies and things. That's sort of a Pollyanna maybe statement, but I truly believe that, right? And so at Paramount, one of the big projects that I'm working on here is Children of Blood and Bone, and it's a really exciting, incredible world set in an Afrofuturistic Nigeria written by this brilliant filmmaker, Tomi Adeyemi. We just brought aboard this incredible filmmaker to sort of bring it to life. And it's this incredibly rich story set in Africa with a very big commercial bent that, feels like Harry Potter. It feels like, Hunger Games. They're real stakes, but, two Black women are at the center of that story, right? And I think it's incredible that Paramount wants to make a movie like that. And it's incredible to be a part of the team that brings it to life. And for me, I also think about having not often seen that myself, right? And what that can do for another audience or younger audiences or folks who come to see this. So anyway, the experience has been it's been great, in terms of acquiring that movie and having that be something that is a very important one for the studio in the next couple of years for us to put out in the next couple of years. I think it's also important for me as a person who's a Black woman to sort of be able to champion those things, those stories, those projects that I think an audience that has not been able to see themselves before would want to see, right? I have a little sister who's like 23, and I always think about, like, would Sinea think this is dope, right? And maybe by contrast, the fact that I did not often get to see those sorts of things. So anyway, I think it's really powerful what we get to do and like the scale at which we get to do it. So
That's beautiful, and can't wait to see. Do you know when it's coming out? Not yet.
We have to hit a number of like markers. So no, but
Soon.
yeah, 25, 26 probably. Yeah. Mhm.
Well, another movie that we're also very excited to see comes out this Christmas. And Sheila, we just wanted to ask you a little bit about your experience with The Color Purple and working with Blitz, who's a incredibly talented director, but who is also like relatively new and had never done a movie of this size. And he really went from doing something that was like very, very small and intimate and personal to making, this like mega thing. So just curious if there's anything you'd like to share about that experience.
Blitz is awesome. That's the first thing to share. He's a very visionary director. He is, I think, even in his first film, Burial of Kojo, he made it for no money, but it looks beautiful. Like he shot it in Ghana, so his money went further there. But I think, and this is important to note for emerging filmmakers, that movie was small in scale in comparison to what he's doing now, but it was very clear that his aspiration was to make bigger movies from the elements that he added to the movie that he made. And so if you watch Burial of Kojo, which you can see on Netflix, there's magical realism that he has imbued the film with. And again, that he made it for a price, but when you see what he did with that amount of money, you go, man, I wonder what he can do with a little bit more. You know what I mean? And then you see what he was able to do with Black is King with Beyonce, which, also just felt epic in its aspiration. You kind of went, okay, even though this guy has not worked in the studio system yet, it looks like he can convert because his appetite just from what he is putting on the screen feels big. And so I think that is what gave us the belief in him to go, yeah, no, he can figure this out. And I think to what Vanessa said, then it was just about making sure you surround him with people who have a little bit more experience and have worked in the studio system, like Dan Louston, our amazing DP, who I love his quote, "I'm painting with light." Who works with Guillermo all the time, like bringing that kind of expertise to Blitz, and working with our editor John Pohl, who's got a deep resume as well, and we have a fabulous producing team on this movie who are just like 800-pound gorillas everywhere you look. And so we just really surrounded him with people that not to overwhelm his vision, but to help bring his vision to life. And so I hope you guys love the movie. I've been stressed out for the last year, and the premiere was last week. I didn't eat anything. I lost my phone. Like, I was just like, I'm stressed out. But I hope you all love it. And Blitz is amazing. He's really a visionary. I think from what he pitched to what's on the screen, it's pretty singular. He kind of went, this is the movie I want to make, and that's kind of the North Star that we all kind of march toward. And I think that's the mark of an awesome filmmaker, whether they have that body of work or not. Like, having that singular vision is really, really important, and getting people to buy into that and be like, oh my gosh, that's so great. What do you need?
The movie is a miracle, so thank you for facilitating that miracle, Sheila. And Ryan, while we're with you, I wanted to ask you, I know that in addition to your work at Universal, as if that didn't keep you busy enough, you're also involved with local nonprofit arts organizations such as the Unusual Suspects Theater Company. I'm just curious if you could talk about how your work in these orgs influence your work as an exec and vice versa.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Really, it's making movies with people that reflect what America looks like. I think that it's a reminder of that, and also that talent can come from anywhere. And, I think one of the things that I always say, I think, is it's so good to give young people heroes, and they don't always have to wear capes. Heroes exist in lots of different forms. And so I think it reminds me of that constantly. Donna Langley says a lot, we supersize underrepresented audiences. And that's something that we've done over and over again, whether it be, Best Man Holiday, whether it be Bridesmaids, or Bros or Straight Outta Compton. It's just really making sure that we are making movies for everyone. And I think that that's working with the Unusual Suspects is something that reminds me of that calling.
Vanessa, I'll move over to you. You began, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you began as an intern at Fox. Could you share a little bit about your experience starting there and now being, the head of a studio, and what you think that someone who could be that is in your position all those years ago could have to look forward to?
I did start as an intern. I grew up in Berkeley in Northern California, so I didn't have any kind of touch point for the film industry at all, except knowing that I loved movies and that I wanted to do them. So, I had to find a way to get in. And so after undergraduate school, I went to film school and did a producing program. And through that program, a couple of people really advocated for me, and I was able to get an unpaid internship, which then turned into a paid internship, which then turned into a job, but it took a long time. And, I think I just kept going, like one step at a time. I don't think there was any magical thing that happened. The one thing I really relied on early on, and that I still kind of rely on, is that I always knew how to write well, I think, and consume a lot of movies and stories, and read a lot just for my own pleasure. But just moving into that job, but also in the early days of being an intern and a CE, I just enjoyed consuming a lot of material, and I could write notes, I think, pretty well. So that really sustained me for a while, and kind of was the entree to begin to understand how stories were functioned. And, I was able to work with a variety of executives on a variety of different projects because I could write notes well and do them quickly. And I think that finding something that you feel confident in, or building a confidence early on, I think is really important, because it can just be so crazy to try to learn how to do this job. And you're kind of hit with things at all different angles, and people that have, different working styles. And especially, when you first start out, to have something that is an anchor, I think really helped me. So I started as an intern at Fox, and always gravitated towards family movies. So got a lot of family movies, and ended up becoming a vice president and rising in the live action group. And then when Chris Meledandri left to go to Universal, they asked me if I wanted to do animation. And I had done a lot of kind of live action movies with visual effects components to them, but I had never actually made a full-on animated movie. So I kind of had to rely again on my storytelling skills as I really kind of learn the animation process. So again, like I'm always holding on to that anchor as I learn new things.
Congrats on such an amazing journey.
Thank you.
To all of you. Tara, we'll talk about yours quickly, but I think the one thing that's different about the Onyx Collective from the rest of the studios being represented here is that it's a brand new entity and one that's, specifically geared toward the telling of underrepresented stories. So is there anything about your journey over the last couple of years that has been particularly exciting or challenging as you get to sort of like create your own specific vision of what a 21st century brand can be? Those are run-on questions, sorry.
No, but I love this question. Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about this in the way that you framed it of just the last few years, I think I was at Netflix before I was at Disney, and I worked on shows that were truly global and got a sense of what worked in a lot of different regions. And it was interesting, like working on a show like Narcos or Orange is the New Black. It just felt like these were shows with people of color at the center and people with characters and actors who didn't look like a lot of what we see in sort of traditional TV in the United States. But we were seeing at Netflix, I mean, it's no secret that Orange was the biggest show for the platform for a very long time, bigger than House of Cards. And I think it really just proved there was a type of storytelling, a type of character, a point of view that the audience really ate up. And I think for me personally, I also just wanted the opportunity to work on those types of stories. And so to go from just personally committing to wanting to work on projects that my family would love and felt like they were reflective of the way that I saw the world and my friends and, an audience that just wasn't always top of mind or kind of felt like optional as these companies are building their slates. It's pretty incredible to me that here I am at Disney, which, is celebrating its 100th year this year. And we're building a new brand for a company that is really organized and thinks of itself as a collection of brands. And so I think a few things kind of happened. I think, post 2020 and also as the business has moved towards being more consumer driven and really wanting to make sure that there is an offering for very different types of audiences, the business has just realized like there does need to be true diversity in what we're giving. And as I think Ryan even said, that's on us to make sure that what we're putting out is reflective of the world around us. So I think there was just a very clear sense of the business need. And so when I came to Disney, I first joined through a overall deal at Hulu as a producer. And I think my bosses saw the things that I was building on my own personal slate. Like I had a show called Hair Tales, which was a docuseries about Black women and beauty and identity, but all through the lens of Black hair. And I also acquired a book called The Other Black Girl. That series just launched on Hulu. And they asked me, I then went to run Freeform. And the idea for a brand that was centered on underrepresented BIPOC, audiences had already been in the works and had been in conversation at the company. And I think it was just an intersection of, again, that clear sense of this is a business need and my personal interest. The conversation came to me, and my joke is it became a situation where it was like, if you break it, you buy it. Because I had a lot of thoughts and a lot of ideas, and they were like, okay, cool. Why don't you go build this thing? And so here we are. It's been only 2 years since we launched, but it's been pretty incredible. It's great. Yeah, does that kind of answer your question? I love what you said about like a 21st century studio. I think for me, what that really means, my hope is two things really. One, I want to be a place that can just go where the creative leads. I think these traditional ideas of platform, studio, and like how we think about distribution, as we all know, that's all very rapidly evolving. And we are a business that just is collaborative even across all of our companies. Like I think there was a moment where we all thought we could do it by ourselves. And I think we're now seeing like we do kind of all need each other. So being flexible, not only in deal making, but also in the creativity. But also I own and embrace the fact that, we all use these terms like underrepresented and BIPOC, and, it'll be something else that we're calling ourselves in a couple of years. I would love for our brand to not necessarily for that to be the marker, but as we launch more shows, as we put more things out, that it's just synonymous with like a slightly different point of view. It feels like this is going to be something special. You're going to get something different, but it isn't necessarily couched in, oh, these are people of color. Like I would love to get to a place where we're the ones that define what that means. And we kind of, in some ways, just sort of change the language around us as kind of the other.
That's beautiful. And I think all 5 of you are doing it in your own unique way, which is really beautiful to see. Okay, last question before we pass it over to our audience. I imagine many people who are listening today could see themselves as doing what you're doing right now, running a studio and making big decisions, impacting the lives of many, many, many. Do you have any thoughts or tips of like how to prepare to get someone a little bit closer to being able to one day do the things that you do? I love Vanessa said like a lot of it relied on your writing and your writing skills, and that sort of like was one thing that like really moved you forward. So anything along those lines, practical or more philosophical, that people could be working on?
I was going to say, I think that there's so many different things that you all can do. I should say so much of the information about the things that we're working on, how we're doing them, it's online. And, I think that just sort of like being a student of the industry, I know for me, when I was in college, I went to college in Miami and I was very far from Hollywood, but I'd make it a point to try to read the trades online, just sort of to see what was happening. I think Sheila, it was you who said sort of like what the trends are, so just that you have a sense of, what the business is actually doing. And I think that's also just a great way to sort of learn the names of people. I think as a society, a lot of times, it's very easy for us to latch on to actors because they are the performers in front of the camera, but also like learning the names of the people behind the scenes, whether that be directors or whether it be producers, you can sort of start to see the trends. Like I know for myself, I was like, oh, like Jerry Bruckheimer, he seems to do every big action movie. And so therefore, like when you're in the business, you're like, okay, that's sort of what he does. Obviously he does other things, but he's kind of associated with sort of like the big summer blockbuster. And so I think that that's some advice that I would give, but also just to have a point of view, just sort of to develop your taste, pay attention to the types of movies that you like, the types of shows that you like, also the types of movies and shows that you don't like. Because you can sort of discover your own taste within that and sort of really interrogate your soul in terms of like why you're responding to that particular story and not the other one. So that's just a little bit of advice that I would give.
Developing your taste is really important in your point of view. I think, I still to this day, and I've been doing this for a little bit now, to this day, there's things that I'll read and pass on where I'm like, ooh, did I make a mistake? Like, maybe I should have picked that up. And then it comes out and doesn't do well. And I'm like, but I think, Here's the thing though, you have to be able to stand on your square and say, even whether it does well or it doesn't do well, here's why it didn't work for me. And I think that's really important. I think people will respect you, even if they don't agree with you. They will respect your perspective if it's not just, oh, I just didn't feel it. Like, it's like, really kind of own your perspective and why you're responding to something or not. And that just for me, what it took was just reading everything, watching everything. And the more I did that, just the more I refined my palette.
Consuming content sort of at large is really important. I think that, should be movies, it should be shorts, it should be podcasts, it should be plays. I remember I worked for a boss a number of years ago when I was still a coordinator, and we were producing this play, and I'm from New York City. I don't know that I'd even really seen a Broadway play at that point, right? And I was living in Los Angeles, and, cut to, I was running Radical Act, and I've attached us to a play as producers, right? Like, consume everything that you can in order to develop, that point of view and that perspective. I mean, also anecdotally, I can't tell you how many potential assistants I've sat down with where I'm like, oh, what movies have you seen recently? And they haven't seen movies. And I'm like, what? You haven't seen, this is, that's the entire thing. Right. So, it's consuming as much as possible. And I think across as many mediums as possible, our businesses and our jobs are changing so rapidly. Look at TikTok, as maybe crass as that may be to say, right? Like, who are the people that folks are leaning into that have a platform there? How, I just feel like we should just be paying attention to everything, especially as these businesses evolve and change. But also, so that we can develop our palettes and articulate what we like and don't like, since that is so much of the job.
Yeah. Vanessa, you had something?
Yeah, the other thing I was just going to say is it's also helpful to build your own creative community in whatever way you can, whether it be an in-person community or, online, however it is, because often you'll find that people who are creative, especially if you're in Los Angeles and you have access to other people that are assistants or trying to come up in the business, like, you will support one another and help one another as well. And I think that also was really important to me really, really early on.
Thank you all. Those are great answers. Okay, so we're going to move on to our audience questions. There's a lot, and I'm going to try to get through as many as possible. So I'll encourage you all to keep your answers brief so we can move them quick. We'll treat this as rapid fire. Also, if there's something that's too hard, or you just feel free you can just call pass. All right. What makes you good at your jobs?
Pass.
Great. You're all charismatic. That's what makes you good at your job. Are web series still a solid platform to develop a project?
Sure. I mean, if you have the resources and, you can produce something, being able to put it up online and get feedback from an audience and, be able to actually get the attention of a network or a studio based on, a proven piece is still, that's really viable.
Is it helpful to work on set as a producer to do this type of job?
It's not essential, but I will say I've gone back and forth between producing and being an exec, and definitely understanding what it is to have to put a project together, what it is to have to pitch, what it is to have to address a note on set makes me a better executive, because sometimes when you're only on the executive side and you're given all these random notes and you don't know kind of the process and the mechanics of something that you say and what's required then to execute against that, I think experience anywhere you can get it is useful for these jobs for sure.
But to Tara's point, you want to develop movies, not writing samples. So you want to be on the producing side, the production side, so you understand what actually makes it to the movie. And that will help you when you're developing as an executive as well.
And also as an executive early on asked to go on set, or you can have that interesting on-set experience on either side, but you have to be proactive about it.
Do you know almost immediately during a pitch when you are going to connect or not with a project? Like, do you feel like, is it true that in the first 2 minutes you already have that thing that feels right or doesn't?
I don't know about 2 minutes, but definitely.
Okay, 5 minutes. 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Do most of your department's company offer internships for college students? I would say all of them, yeah?
Yes.
And
We also have a page program too for recent graduates as well.
We
amazing.
also have a page program.
Do you feel like a college degree is absolutely necessary to do the job that you do?
And a degree, not necessarily, but college does just provide time, resources, space to intern, to meet other, people who are interested in the business, to play and experiment a little bit. Like, does the paper actually matter? Probably not, but there's definitely value in using school as a platform to get in.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say, here's what I would say. It depends on what film school you go to, because there are alumni associations they're not all made equal. So it's really important to think about, if you're going to spend the money, where you're going to school. And then also, to Tara's point, even if it's not like the top five, like UCLA or USC or NYU, even if it's not one of those, what kind of internships do they provide, or connections do they provide to the industry? I was able to get my first job through we did an LA internship in my school. I went to Temple. We did a summer internship in LA, because it's hard when you're all the way in Philly, right? Like, being able to do a summer in LA and really kind of live here and go to, an office every day was a really great experience, to just understand that, yes, I do want to move here. Yes, I do want to be here. But also, those guys that I interned for helped me get my first job. So they really were my foot in the door. That was the most important piece of going to film school. That was the most important piece for me, was the network.
Interesting. Okay. As someone who's aspiring to pursue development, what is the worst advice you have ever received within your career goals?
People used to say all the time, they'd be like, if you can picture yourself doing anything else, you should leave the business. And I was like, I can picture myself doing a million things and probably doing a number of them decently well. But like, I also think that makes me a well-rounded individual. I don't know that this business needs to be your like end all be all, but I feel like when I first moved to LA, at least 5 individuals said that to me. And I was like, this is not right, I don't think. Anyway.
I would say the worst advice is anything that you find discouraging. Like, you really have to kind of lock into believing in yourself. So nothing discouraging.
Yeah, I just to echo that, Vanessa, I think sometimes too, Hollywood's one of those things where like you can compare yourself. You're like, well, shoot, I've been an assistant for longer than that person. I should just sort of give up. But like, run your own race. I always say, don't compare yourself to anyone else. Just compare yourself to where you are. And so I would just say, like, don't listen to people who are like, give it like 2 years. If it doesn't work out, leave. I think that's terrible advice.
I would also add, so there was a moment in my career where I knew I wanted to focus on Black stories and stories about people of color, and a pretty prominent agent said to me, but you can do anything. Why would you limit yourself? And I think that was really bad advice, because look at me now.
Also, Toni Morrison. Hi.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, you go, Sheila.
No, I was going to give a woo-woo answer, but it's really true. Which is, the bad advice I got was just, and I think hopefully this culture is kind of changing. Hopefully. But I think I grew up in a culture of hazing. So you learn that because, the class above you got, just they were dealing with like terrorists. You have to do that in order to be successful. And I think I just got to a place where I was like, like I have to do that. I think I want to do something else. And I think that was probably one of the best things I've ever done, is kind of get off that train and be like, I don't think I have to do it that way. And if it takes me longer to get there because I'm not going to do those things, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, last audience question. For emerging, like, early career filmmakers who are making projects and hoping to be noticed by amazing people like yourselves, what are the things when you watch, a short or a really low budget film that like really cuts through and that just makes you lean in and excited and inspired? It's if you go beyond the way it looks and the more superficial stuff, like, what moves you out of an early career project?
I think just having something to say, something that feels different. I think that's always something that I look for.
I also just, if regardless of, production value and the resources that went behind it, just, is there a cohesive story? And do I feel moved at all? Like, to laugh, to cry, to be afraid, just a clarity of vision. It's cohesive. There's a clear beginning, middle, and end. And they're able to, stick the landing. Like, you do walk away feeling like, that was really complete.
There are some shorts that I've seen that I recognize aren't necessarily for me, but because they feel so singular, and like that filmmaker, whoever they are the only individual to have been able to sort of bring that point of view forward for whatever reason. I can also recognize that and respect that and recognize that there's something going on there, even if it's not my particular taste. And so I think that's also being able to lock into, that and that point of view for yourself. I think that's really impressive always.
Okay, before we let you go, last question. If and when you get to make a movie about your own life, what writer would you hire to write it?
I would say Nora Ephron, but but probably Marlon James, because my family's Caribbean and or Jamaican, and he obviously can tap into that and harness that. So I think, he's writing novels, not necessarily scripts, but I'd love for him to write a novel about my family.
Your life's novel worthy.
Thank you.
I do like the Nora Ephron answer, but I don't want to steal that. I'm trying to think, is this a drama, a comedy, a horror film? It could be all of them. Maybe Issa Rae, because I think she can kind of do all of those things. And I think there would definitely need to be humor. And she knows LA, and I'm from California, so I hire.
We're bringing up people who are not alive. I would say Toni Morrison.
That's a good one. That's allowed. That's allowed.
Yes, that would.
Ryan?
I'll pass for now.
Great.
Colson Whitehead.
Good. You came in. Love. Vanessa, we'll end with you.
The person that knows my family best is my husband, who is a screenwriter. So I will say him.
Hey, look.
How about that?
Beautiful. Okay, well, just want to say on behalf of everyone who came to hear and see you all, thank you so much. I know that your years are ending and you're probably filled with many people who want to speak to you. So thank you for taking the time. Sheila, I know that you're under the weather. I saw a comment, the chat was popping, and I saw a comment that said, "This panel is such a blessing." So I'll leave you all with that. Thank you for making time. I know that it means a lot to a lot of people watching. So thank you. And goodbye, everyone.
Our pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Many thanks to Carlos and everyone who participated on today's panel for yet another informative conversation about filmmaking. As I mentioned up top, this episode is part of Anti-Gravity Academy satellite sessions. Those are free monthly conversations with high-level individuals in film and TV whose objective is to decentralize resources and information and make them available to as many up-and-coming filmmakers as possible. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, be sure you are subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're curious to know more about the Dolby Institute, head on over to dolbyinstitute.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs, subscribe to our mailing list, and access the entire library of episodes of this podcast, including all of the other satellite sessions that Carlos has already hosted and we've released. Once again, these are brought to you in partnership with Anti-Gravity Academy and CAPE, the Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment. If you'd like to know more about those organizations, you can find information in our show notes as always. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Marroquin. Thanks for joining us.